I was sitting in the lawyer's office, and a chilling cold enveloped me to the point where my entire body felt frozen solid. The dark brown leather chairs were arranged around a long wooden table, the scent of aged wood mingling with the burnt coffee aroma from the thermal carafe in the corner. Light streamed in from the tall windows onto the gray carpeted floor, but it did nothing to warm the space. I am Asher Locke, 34 years old, a financial analyst working in San Francisco. And right now I was doing my utmost to keep my heart from pounding erratically in my chest. 2 months had passed since my father, Holden Locke, 65, a renowned billionaire in manufacturing and logistics, died in that horrific helicopter crash in the mountains of Northern California. Throughout that time, I hadn't shed a single tear. There was only a stifled rage weighing heavily on my chest, as if an invisible hand were squeezing my heart. Sitting across from me was Francesca Vale, my stepmother. She was 47 and still possessed a strikingly sharp, icy beauty. She wore a form-fitting black dress, a diamond necklace glittering under the lights around her neck. Diamonds I knew were worth far more than just tens of thousands each. She sat with her back straight, hands clasped on her knees, and her eyes regarded me as if I were nothing more than an irritating stain on the expensive carpet beneath her. Beside her was Tyler Locke, my stepbrother. The kid was 26, tall and broad, with slicked back hair and a custom-tailored gray suit. Tyler had never worked a real day in his life beyond squandering my father's money extravagantly. Right now, he was fiddling with his phone, the corner of his mouth curved into that familiar half-smirk I'd known since childhood. The smile of someone utterly convinced he would be the ultimate winner. Mr. Daxton Hayes, the presiding attorney, cleared his throat to break the oppressive silence blanketing the room. His hair was snow-white, he wore round glasses, and his voice was as dry as sandpaper scraping together. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Then, without waiting for a reply, opened the thick folder. I tried to swallow, but my throat was painfully parched. I wasn't expecting the entire fortune. I just needed a sliver of acknowledgement. Even a single line in the will from my father saying his son had done well, or a small plot of land, a bank account, or even a belated apology that would make me feel I wasn't entirely invisible in this family. Mr. Hayes read the preamble mechanically before diving straight into the main assets everyone was waiting for. All real estate in California, New York, London, and Dubai, all shares in the companies, the entire portfolio of securities and hedge funds, cash, and other liquid assets, with a total value of approximately $1,300,000,000 US, shall be transferred in full to Mrs. Francesca Vale Locke and Mr. Tyler Holden Locke. I heard every word clearly, but it took a few seconds for their meaning to sink in. The entire colossal fortune, $1,300,000,000, would go to them without any significant portion for me. I looked up. Francesca's lips curved slightly, not quite a real smile, just a small mocking arc, as if she had just won a hand she'd held all the cards for from the start. Tyler was different. He leaned back fully in his chair, arms spread wide as if on his own throne, eyes gleaming with triumph. He glanced at me and smirked contemptuously. Mr. Hayes continued, voice still flat and emotionless. As for Mr. Asher James Locke, I held my breath completely, heart pounding so hard I feared others could hear it. He shall inherit Locke West Industries, including all factories, production lines, registered trademarks, along with all current company debts. I immediately recognized what my father had left me. It was the black sheep he'd jokingly called it in shareholder meetings, the one he'd long abandoned, a company drowning in debt up to its neck, banks seizing factories one by one, shareholders fleeing in panic, workers on endless strikes, and just last week it had made front-page business news with the headline, 80-year-old company on the brink of bankruptcy. Francesca nodded slowly, fully satisfied, as if silently confirming this was exactly what I deserved. Tyler burst into laughter, a short, scornful bark, the kind that pitied a pathetic half-brother. He raised a hand to cover his mouth, but his eyes sparkled with delight. I stared down at my hands, clenched so tightly on my lap that my knuckles were white. I said nothing, because if I opened my mouth now, I knew I would scream. Mr. Hayes finished reading and neatly closed the folder. "Any questions?" he asked, and the room fell into a heavy silence with no response. I stood, legs slightly shaky but trying not to let it show. I buttoned my suit jacket, picked up my briefcase, and walked out without looking back. Behind me, I faintly heard Tyler whisper something, probably a mocking farewell, but I didn't turn. Only in the hallway did I dare breathe deeply. The late autumn air in San Francisco was biting cold. The bay wind made me shiver. I descended the marble steps, stood in the small gray brick courtyard, hands buried deep in my coat pockets, tilting my face to the overcast sky. I suddenly recalled the last full family dinner about 3 months ago. Dad at the head of the table, Francesca on his right, Tyler on his left, and me at the far end like a stranger. Dad looked at me over his glass of red wine, eyes weary, and quietly asked if I was okay. I just nodded and said, "Yes, I'm fine," because I was used to hiding my true feelings. Back then, I thought he was just tired from work, but now I realized he had made his choice long ago. I drew a deep breath. The cold air burned my lungs and throat. I looked at the heavy clouds and realized they thought I would collapse. Sell the company for pocket change and vanish, or even beg on my knees for a tiny slice of their vast fortune. I smiled, the first smile of the day, though even I felt its chill. If they thought I would sink with the wreckage they'd just tossed me, they were dead wrong. I turned and walked away, the wind whipping my coat. In my mind, only one thought remained, clear and sharp as a blade. I would turn Lock West Industries into something the world would have to look up to, and then I'd make them wonder why they ever dared laugh in my face. 3 days after the will reading, I stood before the main gate of Lock West Industries in the Oakland Industrial Zone. The sky was overcast, a light drizzle falling, the old sign hanging lopsided with only one screw left, the logo letters peeling from faded paint. The elderly security guard eyed me like a stranger, taking a moment to recall I was Mr. Holden's eldest son before hurriedly opening the gate. I stepped inside, my polished leather shoes caked in mud, and for the first time saw clearly the ashes my father, or more accurately Francesca, had tossed me. The main factory was silent as a graveyard. Massive production lines stood motionless, thick with dust, sections of the tin roof pierced where rain dripped onto the concrete floor. The few remaining workers huddled in small groups smoking, their eyes weary and suspicious. The administrative office was chaos. Papers piled high, phones ringing nonstop from banks and creditors. The old accountant sobbing because she didn't know where the money for this month's payroll would come from. I didn't wait another second. That very afternoon, I sent notices convening an emergency board meeting. They showed up nearly in full, 11 people, seated around the dusty long conference table, all in dark suits as if attending a funeral. And indeed, they were mourning the company itself. The longtime vice chairman, Alonzo Vaughn, spoke first, voice raspy from cigarettes. "Mr. Asher, we're deeply sorry about Mr. Holden, but as you can see, the company is dying. Over $400 million in bank debt, stock down to pennies, the main plant about to be sealed. We think controlled bankruptcy is best. Liquidate assets gradually, at least preserve some dignity." The other 10 pairs of eyes looked at me, barely hiding pity mixed with skepticism. They didn't believe a 34-year-old financial analyst who'd never run a factory could salvage this wreck. I just nodded, stood, removed my suit jacket and hung it on the chair, then rolled up my white shirt sleeves. "As of today, I am chairman and CEO. Anyone who doesn't believe in me can submit their resignation. I'll sign it immediately. Those who stay will wade through this mud together." I walked out of the meeting room, leaving them stunned. No one resigned that day. Perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps because they had nowhere else to go. The following week, I cut like a surgeon. The 3 worst-performing Midwest plants were shut down immediately, assets liquidated within 40 days to cover short-term debt. 4 senior executives were fired for drawing salaries without working, including one of my father's old drinking buddies. I retained the young engineers, skilled workers, and the elderly accountant who'd cried earlier. She stayed because I promised no one would miss another paycheck. I moved into the old container housing next to the main plant. My room was just 15 square meters. Iron bed, rotting wooden desk, shared bathroom. Days I wore protective gear and worked the lines with the crew. Nights under fluorescent lights I crunched cash flow until 3 or 4 a.m. Some nights I fell asleep at the desk, waking with a stiff neck and stinging eyes, but I never allowed myself a single complaint. I overhauled the strategy completely. Dropped all the low-margin mass production contracts the company had chased for quotas. I focused on specialized industrial products, heat-resistant alloy components for aviation, composites for renewable energy, precision parts for industrial robots. Niche items few competitors could match, high margins, customers willing to pay premium for reliable quality. The first 18 months were hell. I halved my own salary, slashed every non-essential expense, even sold my old Porsche to inject cash. Some weeks banks called 10 times a day threatening foreclosure. I flew to New York myself, waited in credit directors' hallways from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. just to beg for a 30-day extension. But then the first shipments rolled out. I stood by the line, hands greasy with oil, watching crates carefully packed and labeled. Made by West Industries, new era. Small customers returned first, then mid-sized orders, then a major Seattle aerospace firm placed a trial order. Revenue twitched, from deep red to slight losses, then break even. I thought we were stable. Then disaster struck. A flagship product, the special alloy turbine part I'd bet the company's future on, was found defective in real-world testing. Hundreds of containers returned, our biggest client canceled. Stock plunged another 30% in a single day. The press called me the foolish son trying to revive a corpse. Francesca sent funeral flowers to the plant with a card. Condolences. That night, alone in the container office staring at red ink invoices, for the first time I thought of 2 words. Give up. But only for seconds. I called an emergency meeting at 3 a.m. All key engineers and workers arrived within an hour. We worked non-stop for 3 days and nights, tracing the defect to contaminated raw materials from a supplier. We switched sources immediately, retested the entire batch. I flew to Europe to meet our largest partner, no suit, no tie, just an oil-stained t-shirt and old work boots. I slapped the new test data on their table and said flatly, I stake my entire reputation. This batch is flawless. If not, I'll pay double. They looked at me, then each other, then signed a 6-month extension. And finally, a 3-year, $120 million contract. That was the biggest turning point of my life. Cash flow returned stronger than ever. Investment funds started calling. The press flipped, calling me the reviver of an empire. West Industries went from near bankrupt to a name dropped at every industry conference. 6 years after stepping through that muddy gate, the company was valued at $150 million, bank debt fully repaid, new plants in Texas and Nevada, workforce tripled, and I, Asher Locke, was invited to keynote conferences I'd only dreamed of attending. I had proven to the world who I was, except to the 2 most important people, Francesca and Tyler. And sometimes in dreams I still saw Francesca's icy smile from the will reading and heard Tyler's scornful laugh. I knew the journey wasn't over, because I wasn't building an empire just to survive. I was building it so that one day they would have to look up at me and realize how badly they had underestimated the man they once dismissed. That evening, after a long day of endless meetings and signing documents, I sat alone in the corner office on the top floor of the new West Industries building in downtown San Francisco. The city lights filtered through the large windows, casting streaks of golden orange across the walnut desk. On the computer screen were the latest quarterly reports. Triple-digit revenue growth, net profits exceeding forecasts, stock hitting an all-time high. I held an old glass of whiskey, swirling it gently to let the ice melt slowly, and stared into the empty space before me. The numbers were beautiful, but they couldn't fill the smoldering void inside me. Then, like an undercurrent, memories surged back. Memories I had tried to bury deep for years, yet they lived on, gnawing at me whenever I thought I was strong enough. I remembered my childhood beginning with an unfillable void. I was 5 when my mother died of a vicious cancer. She was the only woman who ever held me tightly, sang lullabies in a warm voice, and told fairy tales before bed. After the funeral, my father, Holden Locke, already a successful businessman, took me to the sprawling mansion in Hillsborough with its fruit orchard, infinity pool, and endless echoing hallways. The house was palace-like but bone-chillingly cold. No more mother's laughter, no more hands stroking my hair each night. Dad was consumed by work, absent for weeks, leaving me with the old housekeeper and silent walls. I learned to play alone, to swallow my tears because crying brought no comfort. Then Dad remarried when I was 6. Francesca Vale entered our lives like a cold storm. She was beautiful, young, and ambitious. On our first meeting, she wore a fiery red dress, blonde hair cascading, smiling at Dad but looking at me with eyes like ice. I sensed immediately that my existence was a blemish in the perfect family portrait she wanted to create. She wanted a fresh start, untainted by the previous wife. She began changing everything. Mom's belongings were cleared out, old family photos stashed away, and I was subtly but cruelly pushed to the margins. 2 years later, Tyler was born. The boy was spoiled from the cradle. Expensive toys filling his room, private nannies, every whim instantly granted. By age 9, I had become the extra in my own home. Tyler grew up treating me like an outsider, bullying me for amusement. He'd snatch my toys, blame me for breaking antiques, and laugh uproariously when I was unfairly punished. "You're just a motherless orphan," he once said at 10, shoving me down the stairs because I wouldn't yield the game console. Francesca never defended me. She just looked at me with contempt, as if every wrong stemmed from me. Family dinners were nightmares etched in my memory. The long mahogany table, pristine white cloth, flickering candles, and million-dollar silverware on each plate. Dad at the head, Francesca on his right, Tyler on his left, and me always at the far end, as distant as possible. I sat silently, hands in my lap, trying to eat quickly to end it. Francesca would glance at me critically, nitpicking every gesture. "Asher, sit up straight, don't slouch like a loser." Tyler smirked, boasting about school and exaggerating his achievements, then turning to me. "How'd Big Brother do on math today?" "Oh, average again? No wonder Dad never brags about you to his friends." Guests, wealthy businessmen, politicians, often looked at me with pity mixed with curiosity, as if I were a stray child in a powerful family. I bowed my head, choking down food, shame burning in my chest. My father, Holden Locke, the man who commanded an empire, remained silent in the face of every injustice. He wielded immense financial power, could buy an island if he wished, but pathetically feared family conflict. He feared Francesca's anger, feared her leaving and taking Tyler, the son he loved unconditionally. So he let me suffer alone without a word of defense. Once I ran to his room crying after Tyler pushed me and I hit my head bleeding. He just patted my shoulder and said, "The older brother must yield, Asher. Family must stay harmonious." I nodded, wiped my tears, and learned to hide every wound. Yet I still remembered a few quiet gestures from him. When Francesca and Tyler traveled, he'd secretly leave a good book on my desk, The Art of War, when I was 15, with a small note. "My son is very strong." Or a model car I'd dreamed of placed by my pillow without a word. A handwritten birthday card. "I'm proud of you, even if I'm not good at saying it." Those signs of care were stifled by his fear of family collapse, but they were the small flames keeping my hope from extinguishing entirely. Each day in that toxic environment forced me to mature faster than any peer. I learned endurance, silence, to bear every hurt alone without showing it. I stopped crying in front of them, stopped arguing, just quietly built walls around my heart. At 18, I left that house without looking back. I rejected Dad's scholarship, refused allowances, taking only an old suitcase and determination to stand on my own. I studied in the Northeast, juggling 3 jobs, waiting tables, tutoring, delivery to pay tuition. I didn't call home. Ignored Dad's calls because each time I heard his voice, I remembered his silence amid the injustices. Those years of isolation and contempt forged me into the resilient man I am today. Someone who could sleep on factory floors, eat fast food for months, and revive a dying conglomerate without a single complaint. I learned true strength comes not from money or outward power, but from enduring and rising after every fall. Now, sitting in this luxurious office overlooking the sleeping city, I realized a painful truth all the more clearly. The greater my success, the deeper I saw that my life's worst wound wasn't from work or failure, but from family. The place that should have been the safest harbor yet became the source of all pain. I had built an empire, but the void in my heart remained intact, waiting one day to be filled, or at least confronted. I set down the whiskey glass, turned off the light, and stepped onto the balcony. The night wind blew, carrying the bay's chill. I looked down at the glittering city and told myself that one day I would make them face what they had done. Not out of hatred, but because I deserved to heal. During the 6 years I lived amid dust, grease, and sleepless nights at the factory, Francesca and Tyler, my stepmother and stepbrother, lived in a completely opposite world. One where money flowed like a river, laughter rang out beside expensive champagne flutes, and not a single moment was spent worrying about tomorrow. They spent the $1.3 billion as if it were just meaningless numbers on paper. Luxury cars rotated endlessly. A Bugatti one day, a Rolls-Royce Phantom the next, then a custom-painted Lamborghini Aventador simply because Tyler was bored. New yachts launched every summer, sometimes in Monaco, sometimes in Dubai, all equipped with helipads and cellars holding thousands of bottles of Romanée Conti. Real estate was purchased on whims. A villa in Cap Ferrat just for the view, a penthouse at One Hyde Park in London because it was near Harrods, a small island in the Caribbean because Tyler wanted to host private parties. They didn't buy homes, they bought status symbols. Francesca became a media queen within months. She appeared on every high-end publication and magazine cover. Vogue, Tatler, Vanity Fair. Each time in a different outfit, Dior haute couture gowns, Harry Winston jewelry weighing down her wrists, red-soled Louboutin heels. She proclaimed herself America's last true power wife, hosting charity galas just for photo ops, then donating a few tens of thousands, pocket change compared to the Birkin bag she carried that day. The press hailed her as a style icon, a self-made success. She smiled radiantly for the cameras, but I still recognized that familiar icy smile from years ago. While I built my career step by step, Tyler spiraled downward without breaks. From an arrogant trust fund kid, he became a true playboy prodigal. Endless parties in Las Vegas, Monaco, and Ibiza became his fixed routine. Photos of Tyler with bloodshot eyes from booze, arms around bikini-clad models on lavish yachts flooded the tabloids. Casinos were practically his home. High-stakes poker, baccarat tables with million-dollar hands, always teetering between glamour and ruin. Once Tyler lost $28 million in a single night in Macau, then called the bank the next day demanding another transfer because he wasn't done. His romantic scandals were nonstop. A-list actresses, Victoria's Secret models, even a senator's daughter, all ending with compensation checks and NDAS. The media nicknamed him Trust Fund Disaster, a living emblem of a wealthy but hollow generation. I followed it all from afar, through newspapers and social media. Every time I scrolled past a photo of Francesca raising a champagne glass on a yacht, or Tyler sprawled on a private jet sofa with his entourage of party animals, I felt a dull ache. Not envy. I had my own empire, but the realization that wealth hadn't changed them. It only amplified what was already rotten inside. Arrogance, selfishness, and irresponsibility magnified tenfold. Once, I called Francesca. Not to beg, just a last remnant of blood ties. I said softly, "Mom, Tyler's destroying himself. Can you talk him into stopping?" Silence on the line for a few seconds, then her familiar scoff. The same laugh from those old dinners. Asher, are you still so naive? Tyler's living the life everyone dreams of. And you? Still digging through the trash your father left? Don't call again. It's tiresome. The call ended. I held the phone for a long time, then deleted her number from my contacts. Tyler was even worse. One April afternoon, when my company had just landed its first major contract, he showed up at the Lock West Industries gate in a blazing red Ferrari, sunglasses covering half his face, flanked by 4 barrel-chested bodyguards. He barged into my office without knocking, plopped onto the leather sofa and propped his feet on the glass coffee table. "Heard you're trying to save this corpse, big bro?" He smirked, glancing around the still freshly painted room. "Not bad, but still secondhand stuff. Mom and I just bought another island in the Bahamas. Want me to lend it to you as a warehouse?" I stayed silent, continuing to sign documents. He stood, prowled the room, touching everything as if inventorying it. "You know, I calculated how long it'd take to blow through all that money." Answer: impossible. "So keep slaving away, poor big brother." He laughed loudly, slapped my shoulder and left, trailing heavy cologne. My staff outside exchanged glances but said nothing. I just told them, ignore it. From now on, security won't let him in to cause trouble. After that, I cut them off completely. No calls, no emails, no social media stalking. I blocked every channel, deleted old photos, and focused on the company as if they had never existed. But whenever I accidentally glimpsed a new headline, Tyler causing another crash in Saint-Tropez, Francesca photographed arguing with staff on a yacht over the wrong vintage wine, I felt an indescribable helplessness. Not pity, but foreboding. I knew better than anyone how that spiral would end. No matter how much money, it would run dry someday, leaving only debt, scandals, and an emptiness nothing could fill. I once thought I'd feel vindicated when that day came. But now, standing on the balcony overlooking the city, I only felt sadness. Sad that people who shared my blood had chosen self-destruction, and sad that I couldn't save them. Not because I didn't want to, but because they would never listen. I drew a deep breath of San Francisco's chilly night air, then went back inside and turned off the lights. 6 years had passed, and I knew their hourglass was down to its last grains. I just hadn't expected that day to come so soon. Everything began on a late November night, with torrential rain and wind howling through the steep streets of Russian Hill. I had just ended a call with a European partner. The clock read 1 a.m., and the penthouse was so silent I could hear the rain pattering against the glass. I was sitting on the sofa, holding my last glass of wine, eyes fixed on the laptop screen with the quarterly report, when a knock echoed. Urgent, desperate, as if someone were using their last strength to pound on the thick wooden door. I frowned. No one came to my place at this hour, ever. Security downstairs hadn't called. I stood, walked to the dark hallway, and peered through the peephole. A gaunt figure, drenched, head bowed low, arms wrapped around their body as if shivering from the cold. I cracked the door, chain still latched, and whispered, "Who's out there?" No answer, only ragged breathing. Then the person looked up. I froze. It was my father, Holden Locke. But not the Holden Locke I knew. The tall, imposing man in perfectly tailored suits, voice booming like thunder in shareholder meetings. Before me was a skeletal old man, disheveled snow-white hair, unkempt beard, eyes sunken deep in their sockets. His coat was torn to shreds, jeans filthy, shoes riddled with holes exposing toes purple from the cold. He was so thin I could see his collarbones jutting under the thin shirt, and he reeked of mud, rain, and hardship. "My son, it's me, Holden Locke, your father." His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in ages. I didn't think. My hand unlatched the chain, flung the door wide, and pulled him inside. The door slammed shut behind us. I helped him to the leather sofa, his legs trembling too much to stand. I turned on all the lights, fired up the heater, rushed to the kitchen for hot chicken soup, and wrapped him in a thick blanket. He sat there, trembling hands clutching the bowl I handed him, sipping small spoonfuls as if afraid to spill. I knelt before him, studying every changed line on his face, emotions churning until I could barely breathe. Shock, pain, anger, a vague fear, and above all, the blood tie I thought had died 6 years ago. He finished the soup and looked up. Those eyes, clouded with exhaustion, hollowed by years of wandering, but for a brief moment I saw a familiar spark I thought I'd never see again in 6 years. I sat beside him, heart racing as if I'd run miles. My mouth opened, but only a choked whisper escaped, so soft I barely recognized it. "Dad, I thought you were dead. 6 years ago, the plane crash. How are you alive? What happened to you?" The questions tumbled out, raw and uncontrolled. Just horror, disbelief, and tearful joy crammed into an unbelievable moment. He was silent for a long while, then began speaking, voice slow and halting, as if dragging each memory fragment from a deep abyss. The helicopter crash that year hadn't killed him. As the aircraft lost control and plunged, he managed to open the door and jump just before it exploded mid-air. He free fell into the raging floodwaters of the American River in winter. The icy current swept him miles, his head struck rocks and logs, breaking ribs and collarbone, blood staining a stretch of the river red. But he survived. An old shepherd living downstream found him unconscious on the bank, dragged him to his cabin, and called a local doctor. He was in a coma for 3 weeks. When he woke, he remembered nothing. No name, no family, no past. Just a ravaged body and a black void in his mind. He said the shepherd named him John Doe and let him stay for odd jobs. Chopping wood, mending fences, herding sheep. He lived like that for 6 years. No papers, no friends, no memories. Only a vague emptiness that he'd once had another life, a son, a name. He carried nameless pain, lying under the stars each night, wondering who he was. Then 3 weeks ago, he was in a roadside diner in Nevada, nursing cheap tomato soup. The wall-mounted TV was playing business news. My face appeared, speaking at an industry conference in New York. The anchor said, "Asher Locke, CEO of Locke West Industries, the miracle revival from ashes." He said hearing Locke felt like a hammer to his skull. Images flooded back like a torrent. The big house in Hillsborough, long dinners with Francesca and Tyler, and me, the eldest son at the table's end with sad eyes. Memories exploded. He wept right there in the diner, startling the owner. He bolted out, hitched rides, walked, took buses anyway back to California. He knocked on every Locke-named business until finding the new headquarters, then asked around for my address. He walked over 5 miles in the rain just to stand at my door tonight. He finished, voice raw, tears rolling down his gaunt cheeks. I sat speechless. 6 years I thought he was dead. 6 years living with abandonment pain, the cruel will, believing he had chosen Francesca and Tyler over me. Now he sat here, miraculously alive but shattered beyond recognition. I hugged him, for the first time in over 15 years. He was feather light in my arms, shoulder blades protruding as if about to pierce the skin. He sobbed into my chest. I choked, barely able to breathe. We didn't sleep that night. I brewed more hot tea, wrapped another blanket around his shoulders, then sat on the floor beside the sofa, head resting on his knee like when I was a child. The dim bedside lamp cast a yellowish glow on his face, highlighting every wrinkle, every faint scar from his years of wandering. He held my hand, gaunt, calloused from manual labor, and squeezed gently, as if afraid I'd vanish. We were silent for a long time, listening only to the rain pattering on the windows and the fireplace crackling. I told him about the past 6 years, the nights sleeping on factory floors, the near bankruptcies, how I turned Locke West Industries from ashes into something the world had to acknowledge. He listened, his clouded eyes gradually brightening, nodding occasionally and whispering, "I'm proud of you. I've always been proud." But I knew a vast shadow remained unspoken. I drew a deep breath and asked slowly, "Dad, about that will." Why did you leave everything to Francesca and Tyler? Why did you choose them over me?" In that moment, his face transformed completely. He seemed to awaken from a long dream, eyes widening in panic. His grip tightened on my hand until it hurt, breath coming in gasps as if fleeing a ghost. He glanced around the room as if Francesca lurked in a dark corner, then his voice trembled, halting. "That wasn't my intention." I froze. He sat up straighter, despite his frailty forcing him to grip the armrest, and began piecing together the fragmented memories he'd reassembled during his recent wanderings. At that time, Lock West Industries was in its worst crisis ever. Stock plummeting, debts piling up, shareholders demanding emergency meetings, the press calling him a failed billionaire. Pressure from all sides left him exhausted, sleepless nights, severe headaches, collapsing in boardrooms. He said he had fallen into prolonged severe stress, depression so deep he no longer wanted to live. The doctor prescribed sedatives, but Francesca, the wife he thought was his support, unilaterally increased the dose, switched to stronger drugs, claiming it was to help him relax, help him sleep. "She brought the pills every day," he said, voice shaking, saying the doctor ordered it, that everything would be fine if I just took them. I did, because I was too tired, too weak to argue. But gradually, my mind fogged. I couldn't focus, couldn't remember if I'd eaten breakfast, slept all day. Some days I woke to find it was already evening, unsure what day it was. My heart clenched as I listened. I remembered those final months before the crash. Dad looking gaunt, dark circles under his eyes, speech unnaturally slow. I'd thought it was just work fatigue, but now it was clear. He had been slowly poisoned, turned into a puppet in his own home. He continued, voice growing softer as if afraid someone might overhear. One drizzly afternoon, my trusted lawyer Jefferson Quinn brought a thick stack of papers to the house. I glimpsed something like a new will. I wanted to ask to read carefully, but my hands shook too much to hold a pen, my mind heavy as if stuffed with cotton. Francesca stood beside me, voice sweet as honey. "Sign it, darling, it's just formalities. Let me and Tyler take care of you forever." She placed her hand on my shoulder, guided the pen page by page while I barely understood what I was doing. I knew something was wrong, he choked, tears falling again. But I couldn't resist. My consciousness was trapped in a glass cage. I knew you were being pushed aside, but I couldn't do anything. She had planned it all, Asher. She struck when I was at my weakest. As he pieced together those shattered memories, the truth emerged clear and cruel. He had been trapped in a perfectly calculated scheme. Francesca hadn't just manipulated his mind, she had exploited his incapacity to force him to sign the forged will, one that stole everything from me and set up his staged death afterward. I listened, throat tight. The pain wasn't just for the injustice he suffered, 6 years wandering, amnesia, living nameless, but for how cruelly he had been used by the woman he once loved. I hugged him tightly, feeling his protruding shoulder blades under the thin shirt, and for the first time in years, I cried, not for myself but for him, the father who had silently protected me in his clumsy way, now shattered beyond recognition. He drifted off at dawn, head on my shoulder, breath weak but steady. I sat motionless, gazing out the window where the first light pierced the mist, and in the morning silence, I decided. This truth wasn't enough. Dad's account, heartbreaking as it was still just the word of a man who had lost his memory. Francesca and Tyler would deny it, hire the best lawyers, turn it into a joke. I had to investigate, find irrefutable evidence, prescriptions, medical records, Quinn's testimony, anything to overturn that forged will. I gently laid Dad down, tucked the blanket carefully, then stepped onto the balcony. The morning chill slapped my face, sharpening my focus like never before. For 6 years, I had built everything from nothing. Now I would use that same strength to reclaim justice, not just for me, but for the father who had returned from hell. The real journey was just beginning. I began the following week, discreetly enough that no one suspected a thing. My father was still recovering under the care of a private doctor I had hired. I decided to start from where it all began, the old Hillsborough mansion, where my stepmother and stepbrother still lived like royalty on the inherited fortune. I called ahead, voice calm and polite. I need to retrieve some old documents related to the factory expansion project from years ago. Just a few minutes. Francesca agreed, her tone sweet over the phone as if we were still family. She thought I was begging, in a weak position. She didn't know how much I had changed. I drove there on a drizzly afternoon, the black SUV gliding silently to a stop before the towering iron gate. The guard recognized me, hesitated a few seconds, then opened it. The mansion was unchanged, perfectly manicured gardens, a French-style fountain, gleaming white Greek statues. But now, everything looked more artificial than ever, like a play about to end. Francesca received me in the grand living room in a white silk dress, pearl necklace, that familiar icy smile. Tyler lounged on the sofa, feet on the glass coffee table, phone in hand, glancing at me contemptuously. "Big bro here for documents? Go to Dad's old study, it's a storage closet now." He smirked, not bothering to stand. I nodded and headed upstairs, heart racing but mind sharp. Dad's study was still locked, but I had a spare key from when I lived there. I opened the door, the scent of old wood and cigar smoke hit me. The desk was the same, just dustier. I didn't waste time. I pulled the secret drawer under the desk where Dad had told me, and found them. A thick stack of prescriptions from the private clinic Francesca used to take Dad to. Heavy sedatives. Lorazepam, diazepam, zolpidem. Doses escalating monthly, far exceeding recommendations. Half-empty pillboxes in the drawer, labels matching exactly what Dad described. Francesca's handwritten notes, "Take before bed." I photographed every prescription, every box, every instruction sheet, zooming in on dates, doctor signatures, and the dense repeat history matching Dad's collapse period. First evidence clear and undeniable. My father had been forced into overdoses until he lost mental capacity. I left the mansion unnoticed, heart lighter yet heavier. Next was Jefferson Quinn, Dad's trusted lawyer for 30 years. I found his address online, a modest office in downtown San Francisco, no longer lavish. He was old now, snow-white hair, thick glasses, desk buried in old papers. When I entered and said my name, he paled and understood. "Asher, you know?" He trembled, invited me to sit, then confessed everything without pressure. He admitted immense pressure from Francesca that year. She threatened his family's lives, to sever all business ties, to strip his license if he didn't cooperate. She scheduled the will signing on Dad's most sedated day, forcing him to skip the mandatory capacity assessment for someone on heavy sedatives. "I knew Holden wasn't lucid," he said, voice choking, tears rolling. "But Francesca, she had me by the throat. I have a family, children. I was wrong, Asher. I've lived with this guilt for 6 years." I recorded it all, got his signed, detailed statement. Second evidence. Next, the private clinic in Palo Alto where Francesca took Dad for stress treatment. I met the head psychiatrist, who reviewed old records and shook his head. Mr. Holden's state then was completely lacking legal capacity. Severe sedative abuse led to prolonged mild coma. Any contract or will signed in that period could be invalidated. He signed confirmation and gave me full medical record copies. With everything in hand, prescriptions, pill boxes, lawyer statement, hospital records, I went home and spent the night organizing chronologically. From Francesca's first dose increase to the signing day to the helicopter crash. A flawless chain of evidence, no gaps. I sent it all to my personal lawyer, the sharpest money could hire, to prepare an inheritance dispute lawsuit. But before court, I knew I needed one final confrontation. Not to persuade, they didn't deserve it, but to see the collapse on the faces of those who once mocked me. I went to the mansion again, unannounced. Security didn't dare stop me. Francesca and Tyler were in the living room. She was browsing a new yacht catalog, Tyler sprawled vaping. Both frowned when they saw me. "Asher, what now?" Tyler sat up, voice aggressive. "Begging for money?" I said nothing, set my briefcase on the glass table and opened it. "I'm here to show you this," I stated flatly, voice ice cold. "My father is alive. He told me everything, and I have proof that will was coerced, legally invalid. Dad was drugged with sedatives until incoherent when he signed it." Francesca laughed, but it twisted. "You've lost it, Asher. He's dead. Helicopter crash. The world knows. You're fabricating to steal money?" Tyler lunged, finger in my face. "You bastard, who do you think you are? A cheap analyst slandering my mom. I'll sue you bankrupt." They denied frantically, attacking every detail. Francesca used her authoritative tone, standing and pointing. "You've always been greedy, jealous of Tyler. Now Dad's dead, you invent stories to claim what's not yours." Tyler growled, face red. "Get out, loser. Think I'm scared?" I stayed silent until they finished, then slowly laid out the evidence. High-dose sedative prescriptions, half-empty boxes with Francesca's handwriting, hospital confirmation of incapacity, Quinn's signed statement. The room fell deathly quiet. Francesca's face went ashen. She collapsed into the chair, trembling hand touching the papers as if they burned. She recognized her own handwriting on the prescriptions, dates matching perfectly. Tyler froze, aggression turning to confusion, then real fear. His eyes darted, mouth stammering, This evidence is fake. You're lying." The atmosphere shifted from chaos to suffocating silence. Panic spread across the faces once most arrogant in the world. Francesca clutched her head, breathing ragged. Tyler backed away, face bloodless. I gathered the documents, closed the briefcase, and stood. "The court will decide the rest." Tyler tried lunging for the files, but I warned I'd call police if he touched me. He shrank back, standing motionless as I left. I departed the mansion in silence, leaving them in palpable dread, knowing what they had seized was about to be exposed layer by layer. For the first time in 6 years, I felt justice was very close. But Francesca was never the type to sit quietly and wait for death. Just a few days later, rumors began spreading like wildfire. Tabloids ran photos of me with sensational headlines. Anonymous social media accounts posted long threads accusing me of clinging to power, disparaging my leadership abilities, and sowing doubts about the financial transparency of Lock West Industries under my management. There were even fabricated insider sources claiming I had embezzled company funds, that the company's revival was nothing more than a soap bubble about to burst. I knew perfectly well that Francesca's hand was behind it all. She still had money, still had connections, and still had her old habit of playing dirty. She didn't stop there. She rallied 3 former board members, men who had profited handsomely during my father's weakest years, who had taken thick envelopes under the table to collect signatures demanding an extraordinary shareholders' meeting. Their sole goal was to vote me out as chairman and CEO. They moved so fast that within a week they had enough signatures and the meeting was scheduled just 10 days later. I didn't block it, didn't respond in the press, didn't offer a single defense. I let them grow overconfident and push everything to a climax because I had quietly prepared everything. Thick files of evidence, witnesses ready, and one surprise no one saw coming. The meeting took place in the largest ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in downtown San Francisco. The room was more packed than ever. Over 500 major and minor shareholders crammed in, reporters clogging the hallways, live cameras from every major financial network. Francesca entered like a queen about to be crowned. She wore an elegant long black dress, a diamond necklace sparkling under the chandeliers, hair in a perfect chignon, smile brimming with near arrogant confidence. Tyler walked beside her in a custom gray suit, sunglasses folded in his pocket, face radiating the swagger of someone who believed victory was already his. They took the front row directly across from me, separated only by a narrow aisle, and Francesca even shot me a deliberate, challenging glance. The neutral interim chair opened the meeting gravely. Francesca was invited to speak first as the legitimate heir of Holden Locke. She stood, took the microphone, her voice echoing through the hall, sweet as honey yet sharp as a razor. "Dear shareholders," she began dramatically. "Today I stand here not for personal gain but for the future of Locke West Industries, the life's work of my husband, Holden Locke. For 6 years we have watched a man who calls himself his son occupy the leadership position without any legal inheritance right. Asher Locke exploited the company at its weakest to manipulate the board, conceal dubious expenses, and now fabricates the absurd story that my husband is still alive. It is laughable and shameful. I have the death certificate, the official helicopter crash investigation conclusions, and the fully notarized will. Asher Locke is nothing but a greedy man jealous of Holden's legitimate son, Tyler Locke, and willing to do anything to seize what is not his." Applause erupted from one corner, people she had paid to clap. Tyler sat smirking, arms crossed, looking at me like a defeated man about to be booted off stage. She continued, voice rising to a crescendo, whipping the room into a frenzy. "I propose that today we vote to remove Asher Locke from all positions and return Locke West Industries to those who truly deserve it." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Many nodded, already poisoned by a week of rumors. I remained seated, expressionless, waiting for the exact moment I had planned. When Francesca ended her speech with a triumphant, mocking line, "And to prove once and for all that Holden Locke is gone forever, here is the final video from the helicopter's camera before the crash." The ballroom doors suddenly burst open, drawing every gaze. Every voice in the room died instantly, as if someone had hit the world's mute button. Holden Locke, my father, walked in slowly but steadily, leaning on a cane under the blazing chandeliers. He wore a simple black suit I had bought him, silver hair neatly combed, gaunt face but eyes burning with resolve, the eyes of a man who once commanded an empire and had now returned from the dead. The room shook as if an earthquake had struck. Gasps and screams erupted, chairs scraped loudly, camera flashes fired non-stop, reporters surged forward like a disturbed hive to capture this historic moment. Francesca froze on the podium, face paper white, mouth open but speechless, hand gripping the microphone until her knuckles went white, her entire arrogance collapsing in seconds. She stared at my father as if seeing a ghost risen from hell. Tyler shot to his feet, knocking over his chair, face drained of blood, stumbling back 2 steps as if about to fall, stammering, "No, impossible. Dad, you're dead." My father walked to the center of the hall, voice hoarse yet clear and resonant through the microphone I had handed him. "I am Holden Locke. I am alive, and I am here to tell the whole truth you need to know." He sat beside me, and once settled, I stood, placed my briefcase on the presiding table, and slowly opened it. The large screen lit up with slide after slide of evidence I had meticulously prepared. High-dose sedative prescriptions clearly signed by Francesca. Dense prescription history, hospital records confirming legal incapacity, Jefferson Quinn's notarized statement admitting coercion, and finally the video recording of my father recounting the entire story in a trembling but resolute voice. Each slide drew louder murmurs that swelled into genuine outrage. Shareholders began pointing at Francesca and Tyler, those who had clapped for her now staring at the floor in shame. When my father finally confirmed he had been forced to sign the will while completely unable to control himself, the entire room turned against the mother and son. Former board supporters went silent, faces ashen, realizing they had backed the wrong side. Francesca lost all composure, staggering back from the podium, hand clutching her chest, gasping, babbling meaningless denials. She turned to Tyler for help, but he just hung his head, hands covering his face as if trying to disappear. Amid growing jeers and contempt from the crowd, mother and son slunk away in chaos. Francesca walking fast but unsteady, clutching the wall to stay upright. Tyler panicking behind her, hunched to avoid the burning stairs. The doors slammed shut behind them, ending a 6-year play. 3 weeks later, the court fully annulled the forged will, restored all assets to Holden Locke, and ordered Francesca and Tyler to repay the remaining $900 million after years of reckless spending. On Judgment Day, I stood beside Dad in the courthouse hallway, reporters swarming, but I said nothing. Dad squeezed my hand, voice hoarse. "It's over, son." I nodded. No triumphant glee, no victorious laughter, just a deep release after years buried under layers of injustice. In the days that followed, their ostentatious empire collapsed in the blink of an eye. Relentless media attacks, public outrage, partners cutting ties, fair-weather friends turning away, banks demanding repayment. Francesca had to sell her diamonds to pay lawyers. Tyler was caught drunk in cheap bars, sobbing to paparazzi. I didn't follow the details, only glimpsing a few photos while passing a newsstand. I didn't need to. I knew they were in free fall, from the pinnacle to the abyss in mere weeks. Dad and I chose a much quieter path. Right after the trial, I brought Dad to live with me in the penthouse atop Russian Hill. The once cold apartment with its glass walls and minimalist furniture suddenly felt strangely warm with the sound of his cane tapping on the floor. His morning coughs and the scent of Earl Grey tea he loved brewing in the afternoons. I hired a private nursing team, the city's best psychologist and a physical trainer to help him regain strength after 6 years of wandering. On early mornings, I wheeled him to the balcony to watch the San Francisco Bay. He held my hand and spoke of his days by the American River, sleeping under bridges, yearning to see his son just once more. Recovery wasn't easy. Dad suffered nightmares. He would jolt awake in the night, calling Francesca's name in panic, or sit staring into space for hours as if searching for stolen memories. The doctor diagnosed PTSD combined with temporary amnesia, saying it would take time and love to heal. I stayed by his side whenever I could, listening as he repeated the same fragmented memories over and over. And for the first time in my life, I saw him cry over his own mistakes. For staying silent when I was bullied. For letting Francesca manipulate him. For failing to protect me from the start. Yet it was during those months that the cold apartment truly became a home. We had breakfast on the balcony together. He learned to use an iPad to follow the Lock West Industries news I sent him, and gave a shy smile when he saw the stock rise another 10%. He tried to make amends in the smallest, most sincere ways. Cooking dinner himself despite trembling hands while chopping vegetables, writing me handwritten thank you notes every weekend, or simply sitting beside me while I worked late, silent but present. And I learned to let go of the resentment that had weighed on me for years. Not full forgiveness, but acceptance that he too had been a victim, and now we only had each other. I continued running Lock West Industries with the calm and resilience forged through 6 years of storms. The company was no longer ruins. It stood solid with new factories in Asia, long-term contracts with major aerospace corporations, and a loyal team ready to follow me anywhere. I launched new initiatives, a strong pivot to green energy, investments in recyclable materials technology, and even a scholarship fund in my mother's name for orphaned children like I once was. Every decision was calculated, no room for personal emotion, only strategy and long-term vision. One spring afternoon when Dad's health had fully stabilized, he no longer needed the cane, could walk the neighborhood without tiring, and the nightmares had become rare. He called me into the small study I had set up for him in a corner of the apartment. It was a cozy room with oak bookshelves, an old leather armchair, and a window overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. He sat behind the desk, hands resting on a thick folder, eyes shining yet voice still hoarse as ever. "Asher, sit down, son." I sat a little nervous, unsure what he wanted to say. He pushed the folder toward me. "These are the transfer documents for the remaining assets. $900 million the court ordered Francesca and Tyler to repay. I've signed everything over to you. No trust, no splitting, everything is yours." I was speechless for a few seconds. "Dad, I don't need it. Lock West is strong enough now. I didn't do this for money." He smiled, the first smile I'd seen from him since his return that carried no sadness. "I know, but this isn't a reward or compensation. This is the true legacy I want to pass on. Not because I'm afraid of dying, but because I want you to know I trust you completely. You saved me. You saved this family in a way I never could. I took the papers, hands trembling slightly. I accepted, not out of ambition, but because I understood this was the most honest decision he'd made after a lifetime of mistakes. A way to say, I'm sorry, without uttering the words. Meanwhile, Francesca and Tyler sank into poverty they had never imagined possible. The Hillsborough mansion was seized to pay bank debts, luxury cars towed away in the night, accounts frozen amid countless civil lawsuits from former partners. They moved into a tiny apartment on the outskirts, possessions reduced to a few old suitcases of clothes. The people who once fawned over them, the notorious party crowd, the socialite friends, all turned their backs, some even publicly condemning them online to save face. One drizzly November morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find them standing there. Francesca and Tyler, faces gaunt and unrecognizable. She wore a shabby old coat, undyed hair disheveled, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. Tyler was skeletal, unshaven, wrinkled t-shirt, eyes red from alcohol or tears. I wasn't sure. They stood in the rain, shivering, stripped of every trace of their former arrogance. Tyler spoke first, voice hoarse. Big brother, Mom and I, we have nowhere left to go. Just a little. Please help us. Francesca said nothing, only bowed her head, tears mixing with rain. I stood there a long while looking at them, at the people who had laughed at me in the lawyer's office 6 years ago, who had pushed me aside, who had partied on my father's suffering. A brief pang of pity flickered, but it was quickly replaced by cold clarity. I spoke gently, but firmly. I'm very sorry, but I can't help. You chose your path long ago. Now it's time to live with it. I closed the door, softly but decisively, leaving them standing in the rain. I didn't look back. The years that followed passed in a peacefulness I sometimes wondered if I was dreaming. Dad and I lived together. He became my unofficial advisor, joining a few Zoom meetings with a seasoned smile and teaching me to fish at Lake Tahoe on weekends. We talked a lot, about my mother, about his mistakes, about what we wished we'd done differently. No more shadows from the old family, no more midnight lawyer calls, no more lingering pain in the quiet hours. Looking back on the journey from that fateful will reading through 6 years of factory hell to Dad's return and justice served, I felt no gloating over Francesca and Tyler's downfall. Only relief, a profound, almost sacred lightness. Because at last I had reclaimed the justice I deserved, freed myself from invisible chains, and most importantly, found a real family. Only 2 people now, but warmer and more genuine than any lavish mansion could ever be. What I have been through is not merely a story of revenge or reclaiming assets. It is a long journey toward understanding myself more deeply, understanding human nature, and understanding life itself. And if anyone were to ask what I have learned from all that pain, I would share these things with them. Not as a lecture, but as healed scars that remain to remind me. I learned that success does not fall from luck or inheritance. It comes from the courage to stand up amid ruins and the persistence to keep going even when no one believes in you. The day I first stepped through the gates of Lockwest Industries, everyone looked at me as if I were a fool trying to save a company on the brink of collapse. Banks were foreclosing, workers were quitting, shareholders were laughing. But I stayed. I slept on factory floors, ate fast food, wiped grease alongside the crew, and step by step turned ashes into an empire. No one applauded at the beginning. No one believed I would succeed. It was just me and myself. And that very solitude taught me that a person's true worth lies in their ability to rise on their own, not in what others hand them. I also learned that the deepest wounds are always inflicted by family. Yet those same wounds forge the strongest people, so long as we do not allow the pain to turn us into copies of those who hurt us. I once hated Francesca and Tyler so fiercely I could barely breathe. I dreamed of the day they would kneel and beg for forgiveness. But when that day came, all I felt was pity. Because I realized that if I let hatred consume me, I would become them, cold, selfish, living only for vengeance. Instead, I chose to forgive myself, to heal, and to become the man my mother would have been proud of. The scars are still there, but they no longer control me. I realize that money is the clearest mirror of all. A decent person will use it to do greater good. A selfish person will let it magnify every ugliness already lurking inside. Francesca and Tyler once held $1,300,000,000 in their hands, yet they built nothing, only spent, flaunted, and destroyed themselves. I started from negative numbers and built a lasting empire because I knew the value of every cent. Money does not create character, it merely reveals it. I learned that forgiveness is not always necessary. Sometimes letting go and walking away is the greatest gift you can give yourself. I forgave my father because he too was a victim, because he came back and tried to make amends. But with Francesca and Tyler, I chose release. Not out of nobility, but because keeping them in my life would only prolong the pain. Closing the door on them that rainy day was not cruelty. It was the final boundary I drew to protect a peace I had taken far too long to find. I learned that justice may come late, but it never fails to arrive. For 6 years, I lived under the shadow of a forged will. I once thought justice was a luxury, but when my father returned and I decided to unearth the truth, no matter the cost of facing the world, everything changed. I was not brave from the start. I was terrified. I doubted. I nearly gave up. But I kept going. And in the end, truth prevailed. This is the lesson I want to give to anyone crushed by injustice. Do not stay silent. Gather evidence, persevere, and believe that the day the light comes will be worth every drop of sweat and every tear. I realize that the abyss is sometimes where we see ourselves most clearly. That betrayal pushed me into the depths, but it was there I discovered how strong I truly was. I learned self-reliance, learned not to depend on others, learned to love myself before expecting love from anyone else. The bottom is not the end. It is where we shed every false layer and find the real gem inside. I learned that happiness does not reside in bank accounts. The $900 million my father transferred back to me, I did not squander it. I created charitable foundations, invested in education, built new factories to create jobs. Because I know money is only a tool. True happiness lies in quiet mornings, drinking coffee with my father on the balcony, in the smiles of employees receiving bonuses, in nights of dreamless sleep knowing I have lived a full day. I learned that the truest legacy is not what we receive, but the person we choose to become. My father once left me a ruin, yet that very ruin shaped the man I am today. Had I been given half the fortune that day, I might have become another Tyler, reckless, irresponsible, and ultimately ruined. But because I was forced to the bottom, I learned the value of hard work, perseverance, and self-respect. Real legacy is not money. It is the lessons carved into our bones and blood. I also realized that family is not defined solely by blood. It must be built daily with kindness, respect, and sincerity. When those things are absent, we have every right to let go without guilt. I once believed blood was forever, that I had to endure Francesca and Tyler simply because they were family. Now I understand. True family are those who choose to stand by us, who love us unconditionally. My father chose me again when he returned. Francesca and Tyler, they never chose me, not once from the very beginning. And finally, the deepest truth I have come to know. The greatest journey in life is not saving a corporation or reclaiming $900 million. It is the journey of healing oneself, rediscovering who we are amid the wreckage and learning to love again, to love ourselves, to love those who deserve it, and to love life itself, no matter how cruel it has been. If you are reading these words while in the middle of your own storm, betrayed, pushed aside, abandoned by the world, remember this: you are not alone. The ruins others throw at you today may well become the foundation of your empire tomorrow. All you have to do is refuse to give up. I, Asher Locke, was once the boy at the far end of the dinner table, once the failure in the eyes of the world. Now I am the man sitting beside my father, looking out over the San Francisco Bay, knowing that I have won. Not because of money, but because I chose to become the best version of myself. And that is the only victory that truly matters.